Hi everyone, welcome back. This is part C of week 5. So what I have done is the links to the part A and part B of week 5 have been WhatsApp to you, and it will be loaded onto Core Campus later this afternoon by Nathan, who's the academic manager in Sandton. So we're going to continue, and the things that we spoke about just before we left off in terms of the section C was the three pillars of engagement, of stakeholder engagement. Now, when you look at those three pillars, it's talking about engagement spaces, transparency, and dialogue. So we are going to go through each of the elements and just take you through a little bit of an explanation around that. So, stakeholder engagement is a multi-dimensional process that relies on three key elements, namely dialogue, transparency, and enabling physical and symbolic space where the engagement can take place. The figure that it's the illustration is on page 94. It's figure 4.1. It's in the shape of a triangle. So when we look at dialogue and engagement, right, the best way to build relationships between organizations, and that includes government as well as the stakeholder and their stakeholders, right? And this, so dialogue and engagement is one of the best ways to build relationships. It provides an orientation within which engagement can occur and a specific way in which communication is operationalized within that engagement. The dialogue is the dialogical approach recognizes the emergent and co-creational nature of relationships between government, citizens, and civil society and holds that dialogue. Holding that dialogue is key as a key element of social sorry, let me do that again. So the dialogical approach recognizes the emergent and co-creational nature of relationships between government, citizens, and civil society and holds that dialogue is the key element of civil society engagement. Dialogue as a conscious activity becomes an essential condition of relationships. Interactivity and responsiveness are essential elements of stakeholder dialogue. So, in essence, dialogue and engagement and how that links is dialogue is essentially the communication part where you are conversing or interacting in terms of the message that you need to get across. So that is why we say it's dialogue. So Kent and Taylor, right, use a model that stresses that dialogue has five main characteristics. So what this means is that in order for all five of these elements, when they are present, right, it means that dialogue is taking place. So mutuality, propinquity, empathy, risk, commitment, right? So also there's another model by Debussy. He has operationalized dialogue in terms of three attributes: listening, positive regard, willingness to change. Now, when you look through all of these elements in terms of both models and both authors have indicated, if you are having a conversation with a stakeholder, one of the things is that you're going to be empathetic, you're going to listen, you're going to have a positive attitude towards the conversation, and there must be a willingness to change, right? The dialogue is also um, mutual arrangement in terms of the conversation that is being had. So it's very important to remember that these aspects, right, in terms of engagement and dialogue, and that is how it's linked. You can read up more about dialogue and engagement there is that section in your textbook, which it is on page 94, 95. Let's see if it goes through to the next page and the top of the page 96. So the Melbourne mandate of the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communications function considers building a culture of listening and engagement, one of the three main functions of communications in organization. Developing channels and methodologies to enable, measure, evaluate organizational capacity to listen to stakeholders is expected from the government communication function. So the Melbourne mandate, it clearly states that listening and engagement is one of the main functions. Okay, so you can read up a bit more on dialogue and engagement, 94, 95, and at the top of page 96. It is covered there. If you need any additional resources, right, what you can do is when you look at, for example, let me just try and find an example for you. So if you look at the top of page 95, the very first word you see is stakeholders. Now, next to, it's almost diagonally to the end of the word with where the S is, there's a number 29. So if you turn to your textbook, right, and at the back, you will find the references. There's a reference list in terms of where you can find the, I'm just looking here now. Yeah, it's at the end of your textbook. It has keywords, and those numbers really speak to references. So it means that where it's been extracted from, and you can perhaps read up on some of those resources that are in the textbook in terms of the references for further understanding. If you're looking at the principle of transparency, what is transparency when you look at it in its simplest form? It is a form of being open, honest, being able to be your real self. When they said be transparent, is to be your real self, not to put up a wall and you know, position yourself as someone different. So when we speak of organizational transparency, what this means is openness and availability to all kinds of information about organizational practices, decisions, and even future plans. Okay, so in order, you will look at some of organizations under their mission, vision, and when they have their values, some of them have openness, transparency, honesty as part of their values that are embedded within the organization. Presented as a solution to governance problems. So in terms of governance, we look at things that are done ethically, corruption, it speaks to, and also just doing things from a business perspective in an ethical and honest manner, and disclosing it in a transparent way to the key stakeholders. Affects public policy, its efficiency, and ultimately democratic accountability. So the transparency also in terms of public policy, it has an impact. It has an impact in terms of how transparent it's going to be. And there is ultimately democratic accountability, which means that whatever is occurring, there is accountability attached to it. And it depends who that person or that body is going to be, or if it's a ministry, etc. It is a precondition to government's accountability to citizens. It comprises answerability and enforceability. It's used strategically to obtain legitimacy in the eyes of stakeholders. It is used to actively construct a good reputation, right? Information is not inherently objective, but rather is selective. Therefore, it's choice, presentation, and dissemination create a particular vision of the state rather than revealing it. Transparency leads to informed citizens and encourages dialogue. Transparency needs to move from an information provision to a state of communication to be able to include stakeholders meaningfully. Citizens want government and organizations to be transparent. This requires them to be interactive and responsive. Real-time transparency reporting as things happen, it is crucial. Now, it is very important for any organization, company, any a part of the government. Also, if you look at non-profit organizations in terms of their reporting. So non-profit organizations are not there to make a profit. They are there to secure funding, right, in order to be able to run the operations of the business. But similarly, is also then used to actually put back into communities and to assist them. Now, if an organization like a nonprofit organization is existing, however, what it's doing is that maybe some of the funders, and this is just for illustration purposes, one of their funders give them a whole lot of money and a suitcase full of cash and say they're giving a cash contribution towards this charity or this nonprofit organization, and someone from the company, the nonprofit organization, takes this bag of money and swindles it, and it's not accounted for in the financial statements. That is lacking in transparency. It's bordering, well, it's going into corruption. It speaks to that, etc. The same goes for organizations. So these days, organizations are tasked to be more transparent in terms of the way they actually communicate, the way they actually report information. So I've mentioned a few times about the King report, and a company that's listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, they need to adhere to the guidelines of the King report. And one of the things that the King report does is it does a number of things. It's a governance document, if I can put it that way. It's a framework where there's guidelines in terms of how companies need to operate in a responsible, in an ethical manner. So what happens is when the company produces its annual report or integrated report, remember I said I'm going to use those words, it's interchangeable, annual report or integrated report. Now the word annual means it's once a year. So they publish their integrated report once a year, depending on when the financial year ends and when the report needs to be presented to the board. It is normally presented, approved, and if there's any changes, it gets done. Part of the report. Now, do a bit of research and go and have a look at some companies' annual reports. As I said, if you go to the investor section, or maybe you go to media or one of those sections, they generally have a search tab if you cannot find it, and you click on it and you will look at everything that the company has done, they've reported on in terms of a year. So they will talk about things like that they always have in the integrated report, the company's mission, their vision, their values. They will talk about their stakeholders. They have a specific section on stakeholders, and this explains how they engage with, for example, employees in terms of health and wellness, just using that as an example. They would speak to investors or maybe communities, right? Their partners, you know, who are suppliers, and so forth. So they would actually look at all of their stakeholders and what kind of engagement that, or how are they engaging with their stakeholders. So there's a specific section in those reports around stakeholders and stakeholder engagement. It looks at what they do from a governance perspective. So how do they manage and ensure that there's mechanisms in place in an organization to avoid corruption, avoid issues of unethical behavior. There's some companies that go as far as doing where they have it's a platform that is anonymous and it's outside the company, but it's a free. So if you have to call the organization, just say you see someone who is, they've got product on a truck and they're offloading some of it and they're putting it into a vehicle. You can then call this number. You will be, even though the company who you're calling into is able to see your number, or if you use a private number, they are not allowed to give the company information about what is going on. The only thing they can report on is to say, on this day at this time, we got a call regarding goods that were being transferred from a company truck into a private vehicle, etc. And then an investigation ensues. The other thing from the transparency point of view is many years ago, companies never really tracked and recorded their carbon footprint. How are they impacting the environment in terms of the natural resources? So now in companies' annual reports, you will probably find things like that speaks to they've installed maybe 50 solar panels, and this is how much electricity savings it is per month, which then really speaks to the dependency of power from the power grid and putting so much of pressure on the power grid that it leads to things like load shedding and a limited access to electricity. So in terms of the principle of transparency, it is very crucial when we are doing stakeholder engagement. Even though the investors in a company, they want honesty and openness in terms of how the company is performing, because they have a vested interest in the organization. The next one is enabling the space for engagement, right? So on page 98, it's defined in terms of the kinds of engagement spaces, which we'll get to just now. So government has the responsibility for shaping engagement with its stakeholders. The environment where ideas can be exchanged needs to be actively cultivated by creating spaces for engagement. So when we define engagement spaces, there's a definition of it, right? And it essentially says that it's opportunities, moments, and channels where citizens can act to potentially affect policies, discourses, decision, relationships, which affect their lives and interests. There should be multiple modes of engagement, including formal and grassroots engagement. The effectiveness of engagement is also influenced by the range, scope, depth, interaction between government and civil society. Now, when it comes to enabling the spaces for engagement, there are some factors to take into consideration that might be obstacles to the process. This includes fragmentation, exclusion, polarization. Okay, so it's opportunities, moments, and channels, right? It's basically speaking to the environment or the space that this engagement is taking place at, okay? There can be different forms of engagement in these spaces. It can be formal, it can be in an office, right? Or grassroots engagement where you are standing in a community and you're standing in a circle, and that is an enabling space for engagement to take place, as long as it has those specific elements where it's defined as opportunities, moments, and channels, where the citizens can participate, right, in terms of making decisions, etc. Now, the obstacles to engagement could be the actual setting where it is not a conducive environment. Like earlier on when I was testing the second video, so you could have probably heard, and I only realized it once I had uploaded and finished recording and uploaded, is that when I started the second part, part B of the lecture, the neighbor's pet was barking, and that actually got recorded on here. Now, in cases where the barking would have been so loud and you would not been able to hear anything I was saying, that is not an engaging platform because you could not hear what I was saying, you could not take in, you could not understand. So my humblest apologies for the barking in the background. I will try and be more cognizant of when I'm recording and I have to do it at home. It's actually just quite a extremely hot day. The weather is blistering hot. So I've opened all the doors and windows. I've even switched off the light in order for it to be a little bit cooler in here. So now, when we look at the types of engagement spaces, and this you're going to tie in with trying to understand in terms of the definition, how we've defined it, the obstacles to engagement, you're going to tie that into when we talk to the four types of engagement spaces. So the one is a closed space, right? The description of it is where decisions are made behind closed doors. So it could be an office, right, where there is a door and it's closed and there's no one else allowed to go in. An example that they've used is a government employees, elected officials and experts make decisions without the need to consult with other stakeholders. Example, municipal meetings. Now, in this instance, right, when we say closed spaces, is where decisions, maybe your boss is sitting in with his boss in an office and they are making decisions about your department that you manage. It is excluding you in terms of that conversation, right? And it is not done through a consultative process. So my boss and his line manager did not sit with me in an office and engage with me in terms of ensuring that we come to a decision, because then it would have been a two-way engagement where I would have said, you know, instead of this, what can we do about this in terms of the department when we need to restructure? Invited spaces, and that is citizen communities or users, are participated by government to participate. Members of civil society voice their opinions on relevant matters, example, in Zimbizos, community forums, public participation and consultation meetings, and Facebook pages. So if you take an example, we come back to the WIT student prostates example, is that there was an invitation for the leadership of WITS to meet with the minister, right, to actually discuss this, and then further conversations with the student representative bodies that the students were part of and that they represented the students. Claimed or initiated spaces are less powerful groups that claim or demand that those who hold power listen to their voices. So it is less powerful groups claims or demand that those who hold power listen to their voices. Community protests, marches, demonstrations against different causes and or policies. So when you have, if I can recall and rewind, in Cape Town and in Johannesburg, there was a time where it was quite prominent in the media, right? women were being targeted. There was a student from Cape Town. There was a lady who was 8 or 9 months pregnant that was hanged. There was protest action around that in terms of what is going on. If you look at what happened yesterday with the EFF protest, they were protesting for a specific number of reasons. When I read the news, is that they mentioned that the numbers, there were people, but it wasn't like 50,000 odd people or 100,000. It was not a massive amount of people that were part of the protest. Mediated spaces is media as a key element of the contemporary public sphere are available to discursive spaces independent of state. Now, government, civil society organizations, media organizations, and individual citizens can use various media to participate in societal discourses, express their view, right? A ministerial press conference, individuals posting their opinions on Twitter, or a news report about a local government actions. So when you look at print online media broadcast, the media try and get the best possible information. They try to get to the bottom of the honesty aspect of it, where they need to be impartial in terms of their reporting. So in the print media, whether it's newspapers, right? Online, you also get online newspapers, and broadcast is radio and TV, where you can access information. It is information that's reported by the media, right? And when you hear terms like investigative journalism, it's where they are going and looking at a specific case and a cause, and they try and investigate and get to the bottom of what is going on. And the news the other day, it was in headlines. It made headlines. And if we were face to face again, what would I be asking you? Yes, by now you know. What is happening in the world today, right? What is happening in South Africa today? The other day, it was very sad because there were two people who were lawyers, and they were gunned down on the N1. They were handling high profile cases. Unfortunately, the one gentleman who was critical and in ICU, I heard that he later passed on. So what's going to happen is the media are obviously under the investigative journalism. Apart from the police, remember what the media try and do is they, as much as they get feedback from the police as to what's happening, they want to give people in the public domain information that is factual, correct, and unbiased in terms of their reporting. When you look at the newspaper online or print, but mainly online, if you look, you will see it's called opinion pieces. Okay, these opinion pieces are written by influential people or whoever it may be in the public domain, right? And they speak on a particular topic in terms of why government is failing, for example. But it is an opinion piece that the newspaper makes very clear that this is the personal opinion of the individual, and the newspaper is not affiliated and does not support that specific sort of reporting in terms of the article, etc. So I think you kind of get a sense of what enabling the spaces for engagement refers to. Now, there's going to be an exercise here. Once again, we're going to be doing exercises, yes. So you need to go through and read the information again and thoroughly interrogate it, because your second exercise is going to be as follows, right? It's on the bottom of page 98, like it says on the slide, and it's headed reflection. Identify the key types of engagement spaces between government and citizens. What are the advantages and limitations of each space for the government, right? And secondly, for the citizens. Explain the two meanings of dialogue in the field of strategic communication. Meaning, number one, dialogue as a communication orientation. Two, dialogue as a communication practice. Now, do not simply read the textbook and paraphrase and rephrase what the textbook is saying. You are required for the purposes of this exercise to go beyond Bianca et al. I'm not saying don't use the textbook, use the textbook. But let me just be clear. You need to go beyond the textbook, right? And you need to go to credible sources and get information and then reference it accordingly. So you now have two exercises that I need for you to do, okay? The one was in the previous video. The reason why I uploaded that video is that I wanted you guys to actually get a head start and not to delay the process because this is due tomorrow. So both these exercises, you've got to do them by tomorrow. The others, you might get to do them on Thursday, but as we go along, I will make mention. So the two exercises that I mentioned, the previous one in the previous video and this one on page 98. Please do them in a presentation format, right? And you can then include this information. It's not a very long exercise. However, it is going to take you some time to actually do. So please go and listen to the videos today. Although today is a public holiday, you need to actually be working on your formative assessment. But besides that, is today, if it was not a public holiday, it would have actually been a normal lecture day. So then you would need to listen to the lecture. So I'm going to play you a video now. It is social capital and the glue that binds us together.
Social capital. It's an unusual term, isn't it? It includes capital, but it isn't about finances or money. It is about something much more valuable. Social capital is about the relationships, trust, networks, and values developed between people who take the time to get to know each other, help each other, and work to improve the place where they live. It develops when people are going about the business of being neighbours. Social capital develops over time. When we first moved into our new house in a new city, one of our neighbours called over to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the neighbourhood in the area. People would smile at each other and say hi when they passed you in the street. We had 1 or 2 street get-togethers to meet more of our neighbours. These were easy to arrange, an invitation in each person's letterbox and then wait for them to turn up. We got to know more neighbours, even if it was only their first name. One of my neighbours knows about cars. When we had a problem with our car, he was able to help fix it. I'm certain he could also help me with my lawnmower if it needed some attention. Other neighbours know about other things. I know I can ask them for help when it's needed. The more we get to know each other and become connected, the more social capital we generate. In places where there is high social capital, there's a low crime rate. But in places where people start to have a fear of crime, they keep to themselves, become isolated in their houses. They start to distrust others and social capital declines. I know in my street, if there is anything suspicious or out of the ordinary happening, someone would intervene and call the police before a crime could be committed. Our safety is related closely to how much social capital we have. Our local school is part of our community. The principal keeps in contact through a newsletter every week. There are activities where the school invites community members to come to where they can get to know each other and the people who work at the school. All the teachers are friendly and greet parents and other members of the community. They have high social capital with the community. In places with high social capital, if there is a problem, neighbours will get together and try to find a solution. These are good places to live. People know each other, trust each other, are connected and care for each other and the place where they live. Social capital, more valuable than high finances.
Okay, and so that was a video on what social capital is. It's quite integral, and like the video says, it's an example of where when you move to a new neighborhood, you you get invested into the neighborhood, you get to know your neighbors. Okay, when there is a problem at your home or your neighbor's home, and everyone flocks to the home to assist the family. Also, you have a lot of where we where you call them community neighborhood watch, right? So they're a group of individuals who are based within a community that are invested in the safety and security of the community. So that is what the essence of social community boils down to, or social capital rather boils down to. Okay, it's the people aspect or the people element of investing in people. Now, building social capital through engagement. If you looked in the example of the video, it literally means walking over to the neighbor's house and actually engaging with them and having a cup of tea with them, getting to know them. So it is building that social capital by engaging with people, speaking to them, talking to them. So the complex problems faced by our country or our world require new and innovative solutions that cannot solely come from the government. There needs to be engagement between government and other stakeholders, such as businesses, community organizations, union, and other components of society. Engagement should not only be to understand citizens, but also to reach a consensus on the most important matters in society and also to build social capital. So when you look at a complex, right, where it's a residential complex, where you have residents that are living in there, right, and then you have what you call a body corporate. Now, a body corporate is a formalized institution, association, or a body that is created, right? And then you would have trustees that form part of that body corporate. You would have a chairperson. And what would happen is that when owners in that specific complex have challenges or there's certain things that they want to raise, what they would do is they would take their concerns through to the body corporate, and then the body corporate would then discuss, deliberate, and then probably speak to the managing agent. For example, if you have one side of the electric fence that's damaged and it's not getting fixed, that would be something that would be escalated, especially to those for those residents that live close by to the electric fence. And what they would then do is that they would raise these concerns to the body corporate to say, this is unacceptable and why. And then remember, it's run very strictly in terms of how the financials are done. It's done from an ethical point of view, and everything is documented and accounted for, and it requires accountants, etc. So then the managing agent said, right, we're going to get it fixed and get that resolved. So that is done through a platform, and it same goes for like even student representatives. So the student representative body or council that represents students in a college, in a university, wherever it may be, right? They come to the forefront with issues and they raise it, like in the WITS instance, the Student Representative Council had indicated through the media what are they looking to, the outcome of this whole negotiation and all of that. So remember reading the news and keep it. So when I make reference to certain examples, that you're also not a bit lost, that you are following and you can make the connection between the theory and the example that I'm using. So social capital, right? There is on page 100, there is an example that's there, which we'll cover. So social capital is a set of social relationships that the knowledge embedded in these relationships, which can be utilized by a particular group or community. It is a set of social relationships and knowledge embedded in these relationships, which can be utilized by a particular group or community. It consists of material, symbolic, cultural knowledge, and relational resources available to people. It stems from connections, relationships, and memberships of people. So remember, you can be a member of a specific body, like, for example, PRISA, Public Relations Institute of South Africa, as a member of PRISA at the annual general meeting. As a member, you are able to raise concerns, right, on behalf of members or individually. Social capital reflects the actual state of society and the possibilities that society can bring. Okay. In the context of government civil society relations, social capital can be conceptualized as the state's responsiveness to society. A wider network has broader access to the knowledge and expertise of other organizations in society, thus leading to better solutions to common problems. Okay, so I think that is quite self-explanatory in terms of what we have gone through. What we're going to do now is we are going to look at, on page 100, there's two examples that are included, right? And what this example speaks to is reducing costs by tapping into a community's social capital and scaling up a community's capital to economically effective level. So the very first one on page 100 is reducing costs by tapping into a community's social capital. When a senior citizen asks a younger member of the community to utilize their familiarity with digital media to access the information they require on a local government website, the costs in terms of time and money for the older citizen are reduced because the need of travel to the municipal offices is no longer required. Both parties gain new knowledge and the total social capital in the community increases. Bottom line, what happens is a senior citizen, a person who's elderly, asks a younger member of the community to go onto a digital platform to access the local government website that has information that is needed. For example, home affairs, right? Now, what that happens is due to the process being digitalization or digitalized, what happens is the information, the younger person is able to assist the elderly to access that information, which means that there's less traveling time for the elderly to go to Home Affairs office, which is maybe 15, 20 kilometers away. And at the same time, both parties learn new skills. The younger person establishes how to access this Home Affairs digital platform. And the elder person, while watching the younger person do this, also learns. Scaling up a community's capital to an economically effective level. Now, Rwanda which is one of the African countries on the African continent, right? In Rwanda, communities living near 3 major national parks use their knowledge of the local terrain and wildlife to improve the living conditions of the whole community. Through a government program which employs local people, including former poachers, as tourist guide and park rangers, the population of mountain gorillas in the area increased by 20% between 2010 and 2018. In return for the community conservation effort, the government of Rwanda invests 10% of the income from tourism into the country by providing clean water, building schools, clinics, and housing. Now, how impactful is this element of social capital? In 3 major national parks, right? The people of Rwanda in the communities use their knowledge because they're well versed of the terrain and the wildlife, right? And how it could improve the conditions of the entire community, not of their just little of their area that they're living in, but the entire community. So this is called social capital, right? And what they did was through a partnership with government. They build a good partnership with government through engagement processes. Now, this then employs government has seen the bigger picture. They've employed local people, and it's people who have reformed. They were poachers, right? And now they are tourist guide and park rangers, and it had a positive impact to the increase of wildlife in the area. So when you look at government's role that they play, because what government now does, it invests 10% of the income from the tourism industry into the community. And to further that, they are working on the challenges that the country has. Then they are provided with those communities in Rwanda, are provided with clean water, they have schools, they have clinics and housing. So how amazing is that example that we've looked at in terms of engagement and social capital, right? The people in Rwanda who identified that opportunity didn't look at one specific area, they looked at the whole community to benefit all of the people in the community. Okay, so hope you guys are still with me and I'm not putting anyone to sleep, because this is very interesting. We're on a very interesting topic that is so relevant. And as public relations practitioners, we need to understand elements like social capital. Okay. Something to think about is that when we work with communities, remember I say that when I work with communities, it's not just it's about engaging with that community and seeing what they need in order to become a sustainable community. When I say sustainable, that they get to a point where they no longer require charity to be able to flourish and grow and things like that. There's entrepreneurs around the world, not only in urbanized areas, in rural areas. I mean, if you look at some of the things that have been generated by rural communities from the people, it is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Okay, then we talk about trust and social capital. So there is going to be another exercise. So let's complete this slide. I'll go through the exercise and then I will end this recording so that you can actually work on it for tomorrow and Thursday. So the first two you're going to work on for tomorrow. right? It needs to be mailed through to me by tomorrow. And the other one will be, you need to then send it to me by Thursday. Okay. Trust and social capital. Trust is a psychological state comprising the intention to accept vulnerability based upon positive expectations of the intentions or behavior of the other. Trust facilitates interactions even in complex and uncertain social environments. Trust can be fostered by corporate transparency. It is the foundation of dialogue. When you trust someone, you want to engage, you want to speak to them, right? Want to communicate with them. Communication networks are the patterns of interaction created by the flow of messages amongst communicators through time and space. Networks of relationships built through communication networks are foundations of social capital. Communication networks must be fairly stable, governed by rules, and to some degree embedded in government routines. Government engagement with civil society should be part of government policy and practice. Okay, so trust is very important and integral, not only in the work environment or when we talk about social capital, in life, in work, in general. Trust is such a rare commodity, and once you've established it, you can achieve many things. Once trust is broken, right, you have then got to do a hell of a lot more work in terms of navigating through the challenges to get to a state where the trust is rebuilt. And in some cases, the trust cannot be rebuilt. So that is very, very important. Now, the reflection exercise that we are looking at is on page 101. Okay. It is at the bottom of page 101. So it says here, how is social capital built through communication networks? Think of the instances when your social group, community, or neighborhood benefited from sharing ideas, knowledge, or resources. How can social capital be utilized in dealing with social issues such as gender-based violence or online bullying? Some of the issues that I've mentioned to you previously in terms of social issues, changing perceptions, changing of culture. So, repeating this, how is social capital built through communication networks? Think of instances when your social group, community, or neighborhood benefited from the sharing of ideas, knowledge, or resources. So the first part of the question is a theoretical question. How is social capital built through communication networks? Meaning you'll need to access your textbook, you might need to do additional research. Then you need to think of an example, right? When your social group, if you were part of a social group, when you were part of your community or your neighborhood benefited from the sharing of ideas, knowledge, or resource. Please make sure that, so there's two parts to this. There's the one that's theoretical, and the other is experience-based, where you are going to draw on an experience in one of those areas. And please make sure to expand in terms of how the community or the neighborhood benefited based on that. Secondly, how can social capital be utilized in dealing with issues such as gender-based violence and or online bullying? You will draw on some theoretical knowledge in terms of the lectures and the textbook. However, you are going to do research beyond that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end here in terms of this recording. Now, what is extremely important is that in a space of these lectures, all of them, there are 3 exercises that need to be done. What you can do is use one PowerPoint slide, right? First activity or reflection exercise you do on one page, okay, or 2 pages or 3 pages or 4 pages, however many pages or slides it takes you. Then on the 6th or 7th slide will be reflection exercise 2, and you can put it in there. And then once you're done with that, on the next slide, you say reflection exercise 3, and you continue with the exercise. The reason for this is because there's 3 different reflection exercises. I don't want to receive 6 documents, 3 from Mbali and 3 from Nipo. Do it in one document, okay? And make use of the textbook, but go out and do additional research. So the other thing that you need to do, which is very important, is there are going to be 4 things that I need, right? And I'll give you the timelines in terms of what I need you to give by when. So the first one is the Virgin Atlantic. This morning, what we did is, I'm just writing it down, right? The Virgin Atlantic, I went through Bali's presentation and I went through Nipo, I went through your presentation. During that presentation, I asked both of you to look at the peer rubric, the one I showed you, right? And even if you wrote or you typed your comments on a page, I require that by tomorrow morning. So by 10 o'clock, I would need it, right? Because you would have done that exercise today, right? Secondly, there are 3 reflection exercises that I've given you. All 3 must be done, okay? What I need is for at least the first and the second one to be submitted tomorrow by at least lunchtime. So tomorrow is Wednesday. So do this. Okay, so we've completed the slides for the lectures for today, which we would have had between 10:30, no, I lie, between 13:50 and 5 o'clock. We've now completed that. In any event, you would have had to do these reflective exercises in class, okay? So what I would have done is I would have stopped and said, right, guys, I'm giving you 45 minutes. Go off and do these reflective exercises, and you will come back and present, okay? So now we're going to take it a step further than this, okay? What we're going to do is tomorrow's class, the Wednesday class, is meant to run from 8:15 to 12 o'clock. What I want for you to do, okay, you have access to Microsoft Teams, right? And this is where you're going to learn if you don't know how to use technology, because remember, you're going to have to learn how to make use of technology. If you don't know, give me a call or WhatsApp me and I'll talk you through it, or I'll actually talk you through it now. What I want you to do is reflection exercise 1 and reflection exercise 2. What I want you to do is I want you to prepare it, right? So Nipo, I want you to go and I want you to prepare your reflection exercise in a PowerPoint presentation. Make sure that you have all of them in one document. So one PowerPoint will have 3 sections. Bali, the same for you. Then you're going to look at exercise 2. you are going to do the same. You're going to open a new PowerPoint presentation and no, sorry, I'm now misguiding you. Just forget what I said there. What you're going to do is you're going to use one PowerPoint. You're going to send me one document that has 2 sections for tomorrow. And this you're going to send to me by at least, I would say, maybe 12 o'clock. I'm also going to send you a WhatsApp in terms of what was discussed on this video. So please make sure that you go through today's video recording and that you also look at the WhatsApp on the chat that I'm going to send you in Mbali. So this needs to be done by 12 o'clock and submitted to me tomorrow electronically. So Nipo, you are going to open up a PowerPoint document. You are going to do reflection exercise 1 and 2, right? The first reflection exercise, so if you're looking on the screen, it says reflection exercise. You're going to put reflection exercise and you're going to put which one it is, which page it was on, and then you're going to go into the questions and unpack it. Then a few slides down, you're going to have the similar thing where you say reflection exercise 2. You are going to unpack and answer those questions, right? And you're going to submit that PowerPoint presentation to me. What you are going to do at the same time is you are going to talk me through your presentation. So what you are actually going to send me tomorrow is a PowerPoint recording of your both reflection exercises. Yes, a PowerPoint recording of your exercises. So I'm currently using PowerPoint. You can see the image of my face in the one corner and you can see the slide on the screen. I want both of you to talk me through both reflective exercises. It needs to be recorded and it needs to be sent through to me by 12 o'clock tomorrow, which is Wednesday, the 22nd of March. As I'm saying, if you listen through the recording today, you start working on it today, and we would have had class from 8:15 to 12. So I'm giving you 8:15 to 12 to actually go in and actually record, do everything, and submit it to me. Now, reflection exercise 3, you can work on, right, on Wednesday afternoon for submission on Thursday. That is also going to be a PowerPoint presentation of you talking me through the exercise. Right? Just to repeat and to make ourselves very clear about what I want is that there are currently 3 exercises to be done so far. Firstly, what you're going to do is, in order to become very familiar with how the peer rubric is done, because at this stage, Mbali and Nipo, you're not there yet. So we're going to do practice until you become perfect. You are going to do a peer review, which should have been done this morning if you've gone through the recordings, right, of Virgin Atlantic. And I want that document mailed through to me by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Secondly, we would have had class from 8:15 to 12 o'clock tomorrow morning, which we are not going to. You're going to receive recorded lectures. By 12 o'clock tomorrow, I want in my inbox the first 2 reflection exercises that I mentioned. What you are going to do, and it's exactly what you would have done in class. So the only thing I'm asking you to do is record it. Is you are going to put together the presentation of reflection 1, then after that reflection 2. So you're going to give me one document and you're going to present it to me. So you're going to have exactly, when you see my recordings, my picture in the corner, right? and the slide, and you're going to talk through in detail. Then, when it's going to be played on, right, Ambali, you are going to do the peer review, and Nipo, you're going to do the peer review. Okay? So, guys, that's it for today. And I'm going to send a voice note and just emphasize what needs to be done. This sounds all very scary, but guys, it's for your own benefit. So it is very, very simple in terms of recording. You simply go, I'm not even sure if you're going to see what I'm going to do. So when you are in Teams, so you set up a Teams meeting, right? You go into a calendar and you set up a Teams meeting. When you go into the Teams meeting, you join. There'll be a button that says more on the panel where it's to the left where it says leave. When you click down, it has an option to record and transcribe. When you click there, you just click record, right? And don't forget you need to share your screen. So you need to click on share. You need to ensure what you can do is you even do a test run. Do a test run, see, and then you look at the video and you see that it's been recorded. Guys, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to send you a note on WhatsApp chat now explaining the homework, because that is critical, and then we leave it as there. And I will chat to you in the next lecture. But remember, we are not having a lecture tomorrow. It's going to be pre-recorded, so please be aware of that. And I will also let you guys know on WhatsApp.